Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. In our last exoskeleton video, many of you guys kindly reminded me that there was a Halo film, and you guys were right. I vaguely remember watching the Halo Forward Unto Dawn film several years ago on Netflix. And now that we've done several videos about future armor and haven't really gone into Spartan armor, well, I guess we really do have to talk about it. Because it's kind of one of the most badass pieces of armor in science fiction history. If I remember correctly, Master Chief and several other Spartans survived a high-altitude landing without any parachutes or any other kind of deceleration assist after their transport was shot down. Well, most of them survived at least. The point is, compared to all the other armor we've talked about, besides maybe Iron Man's, this Spartan armor is one of the most powerful kits in fiction. Now, just a warning, my Halo knowledge is a bit rusty. I like slow-paced shooters nowadays, and I haven't really played a Halo game since Halo 4. And I know there are all different types of Spartans, along with different Spartan armor types, but today we're going to keep it focused on just the MJLONIR 5 powered assault armor, and look at how close Earth technology is to replicating this kind of suit. We're going to look at the three most advanced technologies in the suit, including the energy source, the neural interface, and of course the shield. The Mark V was 1,000 pounds, and even though the Spartan 2 program turned children into superhuman soldiers through a very ethical slew of implants and surgical procedures, they still weren't strong enough to carry around that much weight. So they needed some assistance. Plus, if you've ever seen a Spartan 2 in MJLONIR armor, they're far faster and more agile than your average human soldier is, even with all that metal on their body. So how do they do it? Well, the Mark V relies on a fusion power core. In many sci-fi franchises, the fusion reactor powers many of the core components in human future tech, especially when it comes to mobile technology, including several of the exoskeletons we talked about in our previous episodes, like Iron Man's suit. And if you're playing Fallout 76, you should know that in that alternative timeline, humanity has developed fusion cores, and that's what gives energy to all the power suits. In our own world, nuclear fusion power has been seen as the next major leap in energy. Right now we have the ability to create nuclear fission reactors. These are incredibly efficient and powerful energy sources. There are only 450 nuclear power plants in the world, but they provide around 11% of the Earth's energy. The power released from 1 gram of uranium is 8,000 times more than the power released from the same amount of coal or natural gas. Better yet, these plants release no carbon emissions. Now, there is one terrible aspect of nuclear fission that we do have to talk about, and that is the ancient monstrosity known by the Japanese as Godzilla. There's also a less exciting but equally as dangerous problem known as radioactive waste. Nuclear fission works like this. You have an unstable isotope, in most cases uranium-235, then you launch high-speed neutrons at that unstable isotope, and it basically breaks that isotope into smaller atomic material. Breaking the bonds that hold this isotope together releases a huge amount of energy. That energy heats up water and releases steam. And that steam powers generators, so nuclear fission is actually technically steam power. The problem is when you break up those unstable isotopes, you also release dangerous levels of radiation and create radioactive waste, which is incredibly hard to store or clean and last for a really long time. It also attracts Godzilla. And when these nuclear plants' controlled environments are breached by a tsunami wave, or terrorism, or power failure, or Godzilla, or all these things at the same time, all that dangerous radioactive material could potentially contaminate the surrounding area. So a much cleaner alternative to that would be fusion power. Fusion is the exact opposite of fission. This is when two isotopes come together in a much more peaceful and friendly hug-like embrace, but under extreme pressure and crazy temperatures. How crazy? Well, one place where fusion reactions regularly occur is in our sun. Fusion reactions release a huge amount of energy, many times more powerful than fission, and also produces less radioactive material. Now, because I'm not a nuclear physics brain rocket surgeon, that's where my limited understanding kind of ends. But I do know one of the main issues with a fusion reactor is that it's very hard to replicate the pressure and heat of a star here on Earth. It's also prohibitively expensive. Although in recent years we are getting closer and closer to creating a working fusion reactor. As a matter of fact, UK-based Tokamak Energy reportedly heated hydrogen plasma to 27 million degrees Fahrenheit. For those of you used to the metric system, that's around 3 croissants and a souffle. It's also much hotter than the core of the sun. Now, Tokamak Energy says that this technology should be available to provide consumers electricity by 2030. Of course, that's if everything goes as planned. Even the best of technologies will die in the prototype stage if there's no need for it, or if it's too expensive compared to competing technologies, or there's some powerful industries or lobbies trying to suppress it. So first we have to create a viable political and economic environment for this technology to work at all. And then once we do have a working model, we'll have to miniaturize it, and I'm not even sure what kind of problems we'll face when we try to do that. Now, I've always seen the lack of a portable energy source that's powerful enough as one of the major roadblocks in the development of future tech. Whether it's the many exoskeletons we talked about in her videos, or more common technologies that could be improved like cars and electric toothbrushes. So for the MJLONIR Mark V armor system to work, it all depends on something like this. Otherwise, you'll just have a really cool looking cosplay suit that won't be able to move at all. So the possibility of us developing a fusion reactor here on Earth, well, it's definitely possible, theoretically. But let's say one of our deep space probes run into the Covenant. In that scenario, I wouldn't be surprised if we developed a fusion reactor core like this within a few decades. After all, it was extreme desperation and the need to survive that led the Nazis to develop spaceflight to colonize the dark side of the moon in the latter years of World War II, just half a century after manned flight was first introduced. Which is also why we need to go back to the moon so we can wipe out all of those bastards before they take out our ozone layer with that gigantic death ray they have up there. The next most important thing about the MJLONIR system is the helmet, and we'll talk more about its armor and protection when we talk about the suit in general in maybe a follow-up video, but for now we want to focus primarily on the neural interface system, which is connected to the Spartan 2 neural implants, which are basically chips implanted into the skulls of the soldiers. This completely integrates the Spartan 2, their armor, which allows instant feedback from all the suit's limbs, and also erases the need for physical control over any of the armor systems. Everything is basically controlled by the operator's mind. The implanted chip also has 2 processor chips, which use the brain to help process things. Not really sure what that means, or how that would work. Now, we've talked about latency issues with most current exoskeleton technology. When we want to move, our brain sends a command, and that travels down our spinal cord through the motor nerves, which then sends electrical signals that activate our muscles. The most advanced exoskeletons we have on Earth right now, like Cyberdyne's HAL 5, uses sensors placed on the skin to detect those faint bioelectrical signals on our muscles. It works quite well most of the time, but it gets the signal at the tail end of the chain. Ideally, something connected directly to the brain or the spine will have less latency issues and will more accurately depict what the user wants to do. Now, there have been major improvements in brain-computer interfaces in the last several years. This technology is commonly used to allow amputees to control prosthetic limbs with just their mind. They do this by placing electrodes either topically on the head or through more invasive procedures where they actually put electrodes inside the brain. Then they're able to use computers to read the brain's neuron signals. The electrodes placed inside the brain will be more sensitive and able to collect more accurate information from a brain's neurons. But the problem is it's a very dangerous and invasive procedure. The human body and the brain specifically seems to reject any type of implants. The more sensitive and accurate the readings, though, the less the user needs to concentrate their brain power on moving an object. Current topical devices require the wearer to focus quite heavily to just do the simplest of tasks, whether it's controlling a mouse or artificial limb. There's also a considerable amount of setup and calibration that needs to be done before this device can actually work. And it takes far longer than figuring out if you like to use the inverted control system or the standard one in Halo. So using the system and trying to focus on something a bit more complicated like walking and holding a firearm and aiming it all at the same time will be impossible with our current technology. We need to get clearer signals from the brain. We also need better computers which are able to better read the signals that we do get. Once the brain-computer interface is accurate and powerful enough, then walking in a suit should be like second nature and require very little mental focus. So this kind of technology is definitely theoretically possible, and we've already created some very basic prototypes. The Spartan neural interface, however, is able to intercept the brain's commands before it even reaches the motor nerves. Therefore, it's able to move the suit faster than we're able to even move our own bodies. But for the foreseeable future, a human wearing an exoskeleton will have slower reaction times than a human without, until we develop a better neural interface. One of the biggest improvements they made when they upgraded the Mark IV to the Mark V was the inclusion of a shield. This was reverse engineered from those pesky Jackal point defense gauntlets. We're not really given enough information about how these shields worked, but they could stop both kinetic energy weapons like bullets and shell fragments, and also absorb direct energy weapons like plasma bolts. The shield is run by a generator powered by the fusion reactor core, and once depleted, takes some time to recharge, making it theoretically an infinite shield as long as the user takes cover to recharge every now and then. When layered with traditional armor, it makes Master Chief and the Spartans a formidable force on the battlefield. So how close are we to creating this kind of reflector shield technology here on Earth? Well, researchers at BAE Systems are concepting the idea of a LDAL, or Laser Developed Atmospheric Lens. It's a laser that ionizes the Earth's upper atmosphere and turns it into a reflective surface, similar to what you see when you're looking at a desert mirage reflection. But all this really does is protect individuals from satellite surveillance and maybe high altitude laser weapons, which is kind of lame and not really that close to the type of shield we're talking about. Now again, I'm not a rocket surgeon lawyer, but I think there's some fundamental problems with how the Spartan shield works. Every action has a reaction, and most weapons have a considerable amount of force behind them. Instead of waiting for a bullet to come to you and building a wall to protect yourself behind it, kind of like how the Spartan shield works, you send a bullet at that bullet and blow it up far away from you. A lot of current generation tanks have reactive armor to protect themselves from missiles and projectiles using explosive panels. And a lot of you guys have been asking me, where am I? Well, I'm actually in Israel right now. And no, this is not a green screen, this is all real. I don't know why you guys would think that. And just a few days ago, Hamas sent over a few hundred dumb rockets into civilian areas with an intent on killing as many people as possible. The Israelis, along with the United States, have developed what's known as the Iron Dome system. This is a defense system that detects rocket launches, predicts their trajectory, and lays it out on a map of Israel. And if the computer determines if any of these rockets will hit a civilian area or important infrastructure, it will send out its own interceptor missile to take it out. It's a pretty successful system. Out of the 400 rockets fired in the last few days, 120 rockets heading towards Israeli homes and civilian centers were intercepted. Although 20 rockets did make it through the shield and killed one individual and wounded several others. But just imagine the huge amount of civilian deaths there would be had those 120 rockets landed in heavily populated cities in southern Israel. It's quite impressive. Now the problem with this kind of system is that it is extremely expensive and it can be overwhelmed. Also, reactive shields like this, whether it's in the form of a missile or an explosive panel on a tank, are quite large and heavy and impractical for infantry use. It's also a lot more dangerous to strap an explosive device on a person rather than a tank or something like that. It's essentially a claymore if you think about it, and if someone fires a round at you and it sets off the reactive armor, any other humans around you might be in danger as well, or if they're wearing reactive armor, it might set off their reactive armor, which would then set off a huge chain of terrible things. Now the concept of reactive armor is meeting extremely powerful energy with your own powerful energy. The problem with the shield system is that it would constantly be activated and continuously consume tremendous amounts of energy. As far as our current technology and energy is concerned, any realistic shield design would have to rely on sensors to detect incoming threats and then only activate in short bursts. Otherwise, it will be a power-hungry system. But as far as a bubble shield that protects the user from all types of energy, we're still at the theoretical stage. One interesting idea we have is a plasma window. This uses electromagnets to contain plasma within a plane. The more power you put into the system, the more dense the plasma material gets and the stronger the shield is. It's kind of similar to those doors we see in Star Wars ship hangars. This technology, however, would be limited by the amount of energy we could provide it. The plasma window would also work in two directions, preventing anything from going out as well. So as far as creating a shield system like the one we have on Spartan armor, well, I'd say we're very far from figuring out how to develop something like this. Perhaps just like the humans in the Halo universe, we'll have to wait for the aliens to come and then steal their technology and reverse engineer it. So from my research, I conclude that humanity is now in the exciting beginning phase of developing exoskeletons. A lot of components are ready to go, we're just waiting on those fusion reactors. The Neuralink is promising as well and will be an integral part of making these suits extremely mobile and agile. But I gotta say the MJLONIR exoskeleton represents a very mature piece of technology. If our current exoskeleton technology is like the Wright brothers plane, then the Mark V armor is like the F-35. I'm kind of glad I did this video because it really got me back into the Halo expanded universe, which I really like. And you know, there are a lot of awesome and relatively believable technologies in Halo. Well, at least the human tech is believable. And if this video does well, maybe we'll do a part 2 because there are a lot more components on the Mark V armor that I do want to talk about, like the biogel that's inside the suit that heals the wearer. There's all these other small, interesting things that are really cool. So let me know in the comment section below if you want to see that. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist.